PTSD is a sane person's reaction to the insanity of war.
Welcome to 48 South 7th Street. Veterans for Peace was formed in 1985 by a few visionaries who saw American involvement in Central and South America and the Middle East as evidence of the warnings given by President Eisenhower about the pervasive and insidious influence of the military-industrial complex. The local chapter, VFP 101, was founded in 2001. They meet every third Wednesday at the Peace and Justice Center on 48th South 7th Street in San Jose. Our chief mission is increasing awareness of the cost and consequences of war, who is bearing the burden, and who pushes the burden onto other people's children. They maintain a presence at events where they think that the presence of veterans who question war might be appreciated. They provide speakers for high schools and groups interested in learning the truth about military service. Recently, they hosted an event open to the public at the Peace Center, which featured 2 Iraq War veterans speaking of their military experience and their desire to practice outward peace. They say, if vengeance or power is the root of our action, more of the same will be recreated. Veterans for Peace seeks to end war as an instrument policy and invites all veterans to join in this effort. Our guest today is Doug Nelson. He's a Vietnam veteran, 1968. Son of a World War II veteran and a member of VSP, specializing in post-traumatic stress resources. Welcome. So, why is Veteran for Peace interested in this issue?
We are interested in the subject of post-traumatic stress disorder because PTSD is the inevitable consequence of sending people into combat. Many times they don't intend to go into combat, and because of the nature of war, they're placed in combat situations anyway. We're an educational and cultural organization. What we try to do is to raise awareness.
And what's your personal experience with post-traumatic stress?
I have post-traumatic stress. I wasn't supposed to be in combat in Vietnam, and we needed a lot of antennas to do our work, and we drew fire from the Viet Cong up in the hills. I lost my commanding officer. My supervisor was wounded and medevaced. A friend of mine was killed on a convoy. 3 days out of 365 were absolutely horrifying. The rest of the time was total boredom. Many people who were in combat units had it much harder than I did. I think the severity of PTSD depends on the severity and the duration of combat. I meet people all the time who were in combat every day they were over there.
For those who don't know, how would you describe post-traumatic stress disorder?
I think it's profound gut-level outrage. Well, outrage, you say? Well, let me explain it this way. I had the poor judgment when my son was 2.5 years old to let him sit and watch a violent Western in which in the barroom brawl they were smashing chairs over each other. And he started crying. I said, Colin, what's the matter? He said, they're breaking up the furniture. Well, see, when you're only this tall, the furniture is your world. And no one broke up furniture at his house. He was outraged. But that's where the analogy ends, because in combat, it's not stuff that's being broken. What's broken is everything we've learned from our parents, from church, from school, about who we are as humans and what we can expect from other humans and what we can expect from the rest of our lives. We've all seen people dead. You know, go to the funeral home and there's Uncle Bill, don't he look good? You snicker and you get a smack when you get home for laughing at the funeral. It's not the way in which our buddies and other people in war, it's not the fact that they die, it's the way in which they die. This is not like the French painting at Versailles where the handsome young hero is falling back into the arms of his comrades and there's a little dime-sized spot of blood on his chest. People are blown to bits, limbs are scattered, heads are crushed. And it affects us the same way whether it's our buddy or innocent children out here. We're also affected by enemy soldiers. We still consider them human beings. And no amount of military training, marching around in circles singing, I want to go to Vietnam, I want to kill the Viet Cong. Nothing can prepare you for this. You're blindsided, you're hit upside the head. And their coping mechanisms, what we try to do is the tattered memories, like this tattered jungle shirt, roll them up as tightly as we can, and we stick it up on the back of the closet shelf in the back of our mind. And we try to keep it up there. We don't talk about this with other people. We don't lay this stuff on our parents when we come home. We certainly don't lay it on our wives. But people perceive us as, well, he's a different person than the one I sent over there. He's different. I don't know how he's different, but he's really different. We don't sleep. Tonight you'll go home and lay your head on your pillow. And if you're not asleep already, you will sleep. All of you, most likely you will sleep tonight. We don't sleep. Some of us are on medication to help us sleep. We startle easily. Let a box fall off a shelf in Orchard Supply and see who scatters. You can tell the veterans.
Hypervigilance.
Yes. In Iraq, you drive fast because it lessens the impact of an IED should one go off. Here, these guys are driving fast. Unless they catch themselves and think.
They say, I saw somewhere that said a good soldier makes a bad civilian.
You have to maintain a level of vigilance, looking for tripwires in Vietnam, looking for places where the ground doesn't look right. Driving by, you see a trash pile that just doesn't look like a trash pile. Is there a wire leading out of it? Is there a place where there's a freshly dug hole? And in order to survive, you're looking for these things. You're looking for movement to the side. Go in a restaurant. Who's sitting with his back to the wall so he can see everything? Probably a vet.
Right. I was just going to ask you the signs. How would someone else kind of diagnose themselves with PTSD or know when to come in for counseling?
One manifestation is irrational anger. The problem with us men, anyway, is displaced anger. The matter at hand is not really what we're angry about. It's something else. And in combat veterans, that something else is always there because we didn't roll the shirt up tight enough. It's always there. And we have to be very careful about directing anger at people who love us for things that really don't matter. Some of us have a lot of trouble maintaining relationships. I know guys who are in heavy combat who have never been able to maintain a relationship. They prefer to be by themselves. They prefer to be fishing.
So in your experience, people that seek counseling, how much of it is the spouse that comes in for?
At vet centers, there's counseling available for the spouse as well.
Oh.
It's important. And I've proposed that at the vet center we have a cookout that the men put on for these good women who have stood by us all these years. But then we have vets whose wives have left, you know, perhaps for good reason, or perhaps for their own safety.
So where would someone go for help?
First place to go is a vet center. If they can't take you to the vet center, go to the mental health clinic at your nearest VA clinic or hospital.
And so when you're doing outreach for Vets for Peace, and you're handing out these resources, where are the best ways that maybe someone could find you out in the field?
They can, me personally, they can find me at the local vet center, the local, county Veterans Assistance Office. In California, we do this by county. Some states do it by state. You go to a state agency. There are two avenues to pursue concurrently. You want to get help for this. The VA healthcare system, of which the vet centers are a part, can help you deal with PTSD. You know, it's like chronic pain. It's not going to go away, but there are ways of dealing with it. It's like a wound that leaves scar tissue. The wound is not going away. It'll heal over, but the tender scar tissue is still there. It's okay. Once you understand the nature of the alligator, then there are ways to keep your hands around his jaws so he won't bite you.
Now, does PTSD affect men and women equally?
I think it affects men and women equally. The cause of the PTSD might be different, but there are more women in combat now than we've ever had before. And unfortunately, with women, there are assaults, and caregivers are rather appalled at the number of cases they are seeing. I can't give you any figures on that, but I can tell you that I've seen several young women coming out of the Iraq and Afghanistan situation who have been assaulted. Afraid to go to the restroom at night, so they go in groups. And shame on these men. They're not treating these other soldiers as sisters.
Speaking of just the differences of having women in combat in this particular war, what would you say the differences are in the respective wars on the soldiers when they return?
In terms of female soldiers?
Or just the veterans of, say, Vietnam, Iraq, Korea.
I see.
You know,
our
Gulf War.
country is trying to correct the situation the Vietnam vets were in, because we came back and we were turned away from VA hospitals. There were no vet centers until the late 70s.
Really?
You know, these people now know that there are vet centers for them. For my father coming out of World War II, he had post-traumatic stress disorder. No one called it that, and no one wanted to admit to being shell-shocked or have combat fatigue. They sat on it. My dad was a master of keeping a lid on it. He dealt with PTSD by keeping busy. We had the shortest grass on the block and the cleanest car on the block. Cut down the maple tree in the backyard 6 inches at a time until we didn't have a tree, but he had to keep busy. And much to his credit, he wasn't rough on us children, and I don't believe he was ever abusive to my mother. But what he kept a lid on was friendships with other men. Close relationships. They tried to get him to be the deacon, one of the deacons in the church, and he just would not do it. There was a part of him that you just couldn't reach. There was a silly TV show called Combat in the 60s. Vic Morrow was a sergeant, and when people were blown up, they would bounce on little trampolines, and no limbs were severed, very little blood, and the enemy fell like bowling pins. And I asked my dad, "Is that what you did?" "Yeah." "Well, that must have been so cool." I said, "Listen, you don't want to know. Don't ask me again." And he never did tell me what it was like. Even after I had come back from Vietnam and told him some stories, he'd get into a partial sentence about a GI boot with a leg sticking out of it, and he could not go any farther.
Do you think if your father had talked to you about it, you would have still have enlisted?
Probably.
Really?
To be honest with you, yeah. I was being lectured about not applying myself in college, and my attitude was, yeah, I'm going to go. I'm going to watch me. I'm going. But I didn't enlist for combat. I didn't want to take it that far. I enlisted to listen to enemy communications and figure out what they were doing.
So, do you think that Vietnam veterans are communicating more with Iraq veterans about what happened?
I can say that we should be. We really should be. Vietnam veterans as a whole don't seem to be joiners. Many of us just stay to ourselves. We're more comfortable with ourselves. We're afraid of what we might say to somebody else. This is the only, Veterans for Peace is the only organization where I've really felt comfortable. Probably because of shared political beliefs. But we Vietnam vets don't discuss politics with each other because just as many of us cannot stand the sight of Jane Fonda. And some of us joined John Kerry in demonstrations when we got back. I didn't do either one. I carried trays of food upstairs in a restaurant.
Speaking of John Kerry, during the presidential election in campaign in 2004, how do you think that affects veterans that people came down so harshly on John Kerry for his activism when he came back?
We veterans are split on that. We're split right down the middle. We would have been happy, I would have been happy to see a Vietnam veteran, somebody who understands the nature of war, running our country and making decisions about whether or not to send people to war. I supported John Kerry. I think the swift boat business was overblown. Mm-hmm. And so many good vets I know, I and they are just poles apart. We find it easier not to even bring these things up.
Right. And why does it seem that you can honor your country or you can be an American by fighting for your country, but isn't patriotism based on dissent as well?
Yes, well for me, if patriotism means old men sending young men to wars they won't go to, then I'm not very patriotic. If patriotism means the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, balance of powers in government, free flow of information, then I'm in there waving a flag with the rest of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if someone's been holding off on getting treatment because they don't want to deal with it, what would you suggest they do?
Give it a try. Come to an orientation at the Vet Center in San Jose. Because there are two things you're going to notice when you go in there. 20 other guys sitting around the table. And the young guys think they've walked into a Flomax commercial. Everybody's my age. What does that tell you? You're not alone in this. You're not alone at all. Other guys just like you are feeling this. They're going through this. And the other thing to realize is you're not crazy. One young veteran recently said, my God, he said, if you don't have PTSD, I think something's wrong with you. If you were in combat, you've got to be affected by this.
And part of the issue, right, is that soldiers are going for multiple tours in this war. That's
a profound difference in our war and theirs. Yeah, some of us re-enlisted, but for most of us, on the 365th day, we caught the Freedom Bird home. And we didn't relax until we looked out that plane window and saw ocean. Just a collective sigh of relief all up and down the plane, and we didn't even know these people. We were sent to war as individuals. I went over there alone. I came back alone. I didn't know anybody. Whereas today, they try to send these guys over as units, keep the units intact. But the fact remains that they are serving multiple combat tours. One unit, a striker unit, was turned around when they got back to their home in Alaska and told they had to go again, right in front of their families.
What?
Yeah. And to claim that they're meeting recruiting goals when they're sending these people back over and over again when they've got post-traumatic stress disorder from going over there the first time.
Let's talk about these military recruitment. What have you seen as an activist and as a veteran going on in modern day military recruitment?
One tactic that shocks me is a traveling exhibit where the youngsters are given electronic weapons to point at people dressed up like Arabs.
Really?
To try to communicate to them that killing is fun. Because in other places, and I think in the Midwest, Vietnam veterans, people in Veterans for Peace, picketed these things, and we told the kids, you think war's fun? Go ahead, talk to the recruiter. Show him the same courtesy and respect you're showing me. He's a soldier in a difficult situation. But come back out here. You give him 20 minutes. Go ahead. Give me 10 minutes. We think war's fun? Talk to us. We'll tell you how much fun it is.
That sounds like it'd be a good way for people that when they come back, veterans of war to come back, to kind of, work through what they're going through, to help the next generation avoid the pain that they're going through.
Yeah, we have to be careful. We're trying to raise awareness, but we're not in this to inflict pain on anybody. You can't get up in some veteran's face and say, look, I don't believe in the war you were in. We're brothers. We served. We enlisted in some cases. We served our country. We went where we were asked to go and did what we were asked to do. That joins us together. We got to help each other. The politics, everybody's got his own politics. This stuff will straighten itself out in time. It's not up to me to lay my politics on you. Not up to you to lay yours on me. We keep a respectful distance in this area. Of course, as a county employee, I have to.
So, what would you say? How long have you been doing this? I'm sorry.
I've been doing this for 3 years, but in Virginia, 25 years ago, I did this for 6 years.
And what have you noticed the changes in the tide of people coming in and seeking treatment, or just the resources available through the federal government?
There's a better flow of information now, particularly about post-traumatic stress disorder. And veterans find out about this by word of mouth. They find out about it on a fishing pier. They find out about it at the golf course. They find out about it at church. Just be a group of neighbors who have a few beers and hamburgers once in a while. The word gets around. Hey man, if you've got these issues, get over to the vet center. Get over and see those guys.
How can someone like me, who obviously hasn't served, support veterans?
Don't lay your politics on them. We all have our politics. Treat them with respect. They don't want pity. They make fun of things that call veterans together and talk too much about what's wrong. They refer to it as a pity party. They don't want a pity party. They just want your respect. The best thing you can say to them is, welcome home.
That's why I said that they prefer welcome home to thank you.
Either way. I preferred welcome home because I never got one. We Vietnam veterans give each other the welcome home. And for us, it has a very deep meaning because we're giving ourselves the welcome home we never really got. And we can only pass it on to these younger veterans.
So from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, it used to be that if you would fill out a survey, and they would ask you basically when you got back from country, if you were having any kind of psychological or emotional problems, and then they'd basically keep you on base until you worked those things out. So everyone, of course, would check no to go home. So I understand now they're trying to implement a program where you get a 3-month follow-up. Is that actually happening? So that everyone has an opportunity to respond?
I don't see evidence of it happening. And the problem is the poor guy's been away from his family for a year and you're asking him to tell something that might keep him in the Army for another several weeks or months. What's he going to say? I'm okay. I'm all right. It's a macho thing. It's what the guys from World War II did. It's what many of us did. Ain't nothing wrong with me. I'm all right. Just let me out of here. All I can say to him is, don't be afraid to get help for this. It doesn't mean you're crazy. It means just the opposite. PTSD is a sane person's reaction to the insanity of war. You're okay. You just need some direction. You need some guidance. And there are good people out here willing to help you with that. There is healing from this. Not complete healing. It doesn't heal completely. You'll always have to deal with it. But there is healing.
I agree. I think that given that this generation has more resources than ever,
Yes.
we should take advantage of those to honor those who didn't have those resources. And thank you so much for all of your information. We'll have some resources available at the end of the show for anyone who needs help. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
An old soldier stumbles from his bed during the night. He carries his rifle to the porch once again to fight the fight. The odor of rice paddies from the shadows fill his brain, and faces drift before him, their death his lifelong pain. The shame of war can't hide beneath the bridge at No Gun Reef, for survivors bear witness for all the world to see. Though many years have passed, wars are fought the same. The nation makes the choices, and the soldier bears the blame. He was just a kid, a rifle in his hand, a victim of an undeclared war in a far-off land. The order said to fire on everyone in sight, but now those fleeing refugees come to visit in the night. The shame of war can't hide beneath the bridge at No Gun Reef, for survivors bear witness for all the world to see. Though many years have passed, wars are fought the same. The nation makes the choices, and the soldier bears the blame. Nine Springs is a landscape, Buddhists agree, where souls of unjust dead wander, yearning to be free, in search of peace and rest. With justice as their guide, they confront this tortured soldier, at whose hand so many died. The shame of war can't hide beneath the bridge at No Gun Reef, for survivors bear witness for all the world to see. Though many years have passed, wars are fought the same. The nation makes the
to do our work, and we drew fire from the Viet Cong up in the hills. I lost my commanding officer. My supervisor was wounded and medevaced. A friend of mine was killed on a convoy. 3 days out of 365 were absolutely horrifying. The rest of the time was total boredom. Many people who were in combat units had it much harder than I did. I think the severity of PTSD depends on the severity and the duration of combat. I meet people all the time who were in combat every day they were over there. We are interested in the subject of post-traumatic stress disorder because PTSD is the inevitable consequence of sending people into combat. Many times they don't intend to go into combat, and because of the nature of war, they're placed in combat situations anyway. We're an educational and cultural organization. What we try to do is to raise awareness.
And what's your personal experience with post-traumatic stress?
I have post-traumatic stress. I wasn't supposed to be in combat in Vietnam, and we needed a lot of antennas. PTSD is a sane person's reaction to the insanity of war.
Welcome to 48 South 7th Street. Veterans for Peace was formed in 1985 by a few visionaries who saw American involvement in Central and South America and the Middle East as evidence of the warnings given by President Eisenhower about the pervasive and insidious influence of the military-industrial complex. The local chapter, VFP 101, was founded in 2001. They meet every third Wednesday at the Peace and Justice Center on 48th South 7th Street in San Jose. Our chief mission is increasing awareness of the cost and consequences of war, who is bearing the burden, and who pushes the burden onto other people's children. They maintain a presence at events where they think that the presence of veterans who question war might be appreciated. They provide speakers for high schools and groups interested in learning the truth about military service. Recently, they hosted an event open to the public at the Peace Center, which featured 2 Iraq War veterans speaking of their military experience and their desire to practice outward peace. They say, if vengeance or power is the root of our action, more of the same will be recreated. Veterans for Peace seeks to end war as an instrument policy and invites all veterans to join in this effort. Our guest today is Doug Nelson. He's a Vietnam veteran, 1968. Son of a World War II veteran and a member of VSP, specializing in post-traumatic stress resources. Welcome. So, why is Veteran for Peace interested in this issue?